Detective Comics 1082 Ram V writing with Riccardo Federici and Stefano Raphael on the art. Much like last issue, and seemingly going forward in this arc,
Mm-hmm.
rather than have a backup, we have kind of the second plot treated as like a, well, there is a backup as well, actually.
Yeah.
But it almost felt like it could be a separate story if they wanted to
Mm-hmm.
just sort of do all the Federici stuff first and then do the Raphael stuff. But instead,
Yeah.
they're kind of treating it like an A plot and a B plot that's sort of jumping
I
between.
and I like the cross cutting because what it's doing with the idea of Batman, especially in this issue,
Mm.
I love the cross cutting that they do here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've talking about Batman kind of in his head in the desert, talking
Mm-hmm.
to Simon Hart. A lot of this issue is Hart, basically making Batman sort of question this idea that he could have done better or more if he just paid for a bunch of stuff rather than putting on the costume and beating up criminals kind of thing. This idea that he has to be the myth, he has to be the legend, or it's all for nothing. Meanwhile, in Gotham, we see that the reality engine is making people forget Batman, and Montoya, the questions try to remember it, and Cass shows up, and Batgirl's sort of making people remember what a bat is. Not the animal,
Yeah, what the members are,
yeah.
and it's what I liked about that is there's a line that Montoya says, "Before I put the faceless mask on, I was, before the desk, I was a detective." And to counter that with Cass was even before she was a bat, she believed in the sense of justice. And it's almost like there's these things that are deeply tied to them that the reality engine cannot affect. And because of who these two characters are, it keeps almost this memory of Batman alive in countering the reality engine,
Yeah,
even in whatever small pieces.
I kind of felt like the connection between the two stories here was that in Gotham, the reality engine's trying to make people forget who Batman is, and like people are fighting to keep that memory alive. I almost feel like what Batman's going through in the desert is effectively the same thing inside his own head, where these inner demons or whatever are trying to sort of overwrite or take away what he is. And obviously, part of it is that Barbatos wants to take over and sort of keep going. The art here, of course, is gorgeous. Federici's killing it. There's like a sort of jester character who represents the Joker. And there's a whole thing here where Batman jumps to save him when he leaps off a building. But it's all, again, it's all very kind of visual representation of the type of craziness that surrounds him. And Dr. Hurt keeps trying to show him, hey, here's your city with everything fixed. Like this could be what you have. This could be what you get. And again, some of the art here is great. There's like him fighting the monster in the desert. And it's just all the shades of the oranges for the sand. Very, very beautiful. Very pretty. So, like, all that stuff's good. I mean, I think it's always a bit of a risk when you're doing kind of like a in a character's head kind of issue. I remember us being very frustrated when it was like 7 issues of that in a row with Tom King during Nightmares. As much as we have praised Tom King pretty endlessly since then, like, he had a rough patch on that Batman run that was definitely frustrating. I think breaking it up with a more straightforward side to the story in Gotham with other characters who are just being told traditionally is doing a lot to help make it feel like we're not just dangling in sort of obscurity the entire time. I think that was a very wise choice. I think Ram V knew if it was just going to be 3-4 issues of this in Batman's head, that it would probably be unfulfilling to actually read that month to month because it would feel like not a lot of movements happening each time.
And then it also, you feel like you're losing what's happening in Gotham without him, right? So the fact that we're able to go back to Gotham and see what's happening since, I think is a nice balance in his story, because as much as the story's been about Batman, it's been also about Gotham. So we're not losing that character here at all.
For sure. In Gotham, Montoya, of course, was investigating that cop that got killed. The perpetrator, she found him dead, seemingly via suicide last issue. Or maybe not, though. And she's following someone who she thinks who's connected to it. This is where Cass sort of swoops in and takes this guy out. Really fun sequence, 9-panel grid.
And the fact that this artist, who's it again, Raffaele? The fact that he almost makes Cass look like a demon herself, right? Because she's kind of spindly, and it's almost like this is the version he's seeing in the head, not remembering what not remembering what Batman was. So it gives her a otherworldly look and really drives home the reality engine.
Yeah, yeah. Montoya has to stop Cass from knocking him out because she has to ask him some questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was good.
It's after this where the whole thing with Batman like collapsing in the desert and like Hurt comes down with the blimp to be like, hey, come up and look at your city, kind of thing. And he has to jump out and save because like a big bat drone starts like firing at like criminals in the street, and Batman has to jump out and stop them and blow up the big drone thing. It's a really fun art sequence, like because like I think because everything's shaded blue with touches of green, when you get to that page where the thing explodes and it all turns orange and red, it's actually really effective. You really feel the difference in the art.
Yeah. On the story side of this, I'm kind of confused at what Ramvy's going for or what Hurt's going for outside of Barbados trying to get full control. Because the first thing with the Jester is if Bruce Wayne tried to take on the problems that Batman does, everything would be solved because he has all this money. It's that stupid idea that comes up every 2 years or so of how come Bruce Wayne doesn't just solve the crime by giving away his money. And the whole idea of the Jester or the Joker character being there is, he jumps off of that tall building because he's like, well, what's the point of me when everybody else is happy, right? Like there's no reason for a Jester, and it was kind of this just idea of without. I took that as that's almost Batman, right? It's in the form of the Joker because that's his great thing, but if Bruce does this, there's no reason for a Batman, right? And then in the next thing that we get is almost this authoritarian version of Gotham where Bruce is given complete control of Batman to him, and it's all rules and it's all, he says here that where's it at? It's a city of fear with one hero and everyone else is a villain. And that's where Bruce jumps in and stops the drone and stuff. And, so I'm trying to figure out what Hurt's trying to say, because to me, all it's doing is telling Bruce, like, you're both of these, right? Like, well, no, you can't give one to the other.
I think I get what the progression here is between the two sequences. He's basically getting to this idea that he needs Batman in some way, not because it's the healthy thing, but he needs to be the myth, he needs to be the legend. And this society he shows him that has these bat drones just hunting people, it's this idea that eventually when he can't do it anymore, he will still try and live in the myth, he'll still try and build up the legend of who Batman is, because that's what makes him feel alive. So this is a city that sort of represents what will happen if we get to that point. And obviously Batman jumps out to save these people because he's still Batman. Like, this is the nuance is lost on this in his head version of Hurt. But I think that's kind of what he's getting at. It's really questioning this idea of, like, is the myth bigger than the man, and is he kind of consumed by it now? And I think that kind of plays into what some of the stuff that the Argums are like doing with the city, and the idea that they're trying to deconstruct the myth. But as we're seeing in the Gotham stuff, it's more than that. Other people believe in it. Other people see the value in it. And I think that's the key point of Cass saying that quest for justice or vengeance or whatever, that drive was already in her before she ever met Batman, because Montoya asked her that. I think that's the idea that, like, they're not all just like this because he exists. Yes, obviously she wears a bat costume. He made that a symbol that others could latch onto. But who they are at their core is still them.
Right, okay. Because I'm just going, like, if the whole purpose of this thing in the desert is, it's Barbados wrestling for control from the Asthma, yet the Barbados is showing Bruce, like, hey, look, if you just give me full control, this is what's going to happen. It seems like it's backfiring, right? Like, because Bruce is going to realize, again, I'm thinking he, like you said, he has to be the man that is also the legend, and that's kind of what Batman is. He's that symbol in the Nolan movies. That's what he says, I can be more than just a man, and I can, continue with the symbol.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that maybe he's bought into that too much, right? To the
Yeah.
point where now for him the line of like who he is and what the myth is maybe blurring, or at least that's what these inner voices are kind of like poking at.
Yeah.
So I like, I think all of this stuff looked really great, and it was definitely kind of this analysis of the character. It is a little unfortunate that it feels like it's tackling similar sort of inner demon questions that the main Batman one is. This is doing it much, much better.
Yeah.
Right? But
yeah.
it is kind of funny that that other book right now is doing all this. Oh, who is Batman really in here with all these Zero and R's running around, and you know, who is the real Batman sort of thing.
And it's just, and I just feel like the difference between Zdarsky and Ram V is like Ram V's very adept at taking the abstract and making a story out of it, right? Like that's his Swamp Thing was. It was a story about stories in, you know, and ideas given life. Same with the Vigil. So here it's just like the idea of Batman versus with Zdarsky. It's like, yeah, he can tell a pretty fun superhero story, but I feel like he loses a lot of that nuance. And that's the big difference here is, you know, Ram V's working with a scalpel. Zdarsky's working with a sledgehammer. You're going to get different things coming out. But you're right. It's unfortunate because you can't help but compare.
Yeah.
Because I was like, man, this is a good version of what's going on over there. And the idea of Barbados being this cosmic entity that got its mitts on a young Bruce with the tragedy of his parents and has been there with him the whole time. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, whether you actually sort of read that as literally something that's latched onto him or just a representation of the grief that's in him, you know, I think that's what makes it compelling to me. So yeah, the big thing is that Montoya gets from this guy they're questioning that you know, the Orgum lady, what's her name? Siobhan. Yeah, she's the one doing all this. She's the one broadcasting these messages and using the reality engine to manipulate everything. So the final page though is interesting. Basically, Talia's waiting for Bruce, expecting him to like have already been there by now. Like he's taken too long. And her men have found someone. We don't get to see who. We just know that he's bloody because he's got a bandage over his head. And then there's a glimpse of whoever caused this violence. We just see the bottom half of whoever it is. I think the obvious guess here is Flamingo.
Yeah. But I got stupid excited because Flamingo was one of my favorite characters. It's not been used a lot.
Yeah.
So, I love that Batman Inc. style run where these different, you know, we have to see a lot of these different villains pop up. And it's cool because Flamingo works with a lot of blades, you know, so I'm sure we'll see Talia versus Flamingo. It'll be a fun fight sequence. And it's just fun to have different villains pop in, you know?
Well, I mean, I think more interesting to me is why is he here? What's he doing? The fact that he was around in the same run that Dr. Hurt was in when Morrison was doing stuff, it definitely doesn't feel like an accident. But we'll see. No, very curious. I feel like this is one of these awkward arcs in the middle of a big run like this where it's hard to sort of judge it until we have the whole thing to kind of look at and see what the purpose of it all is.
Yeah.
I can kind of make some broad guesses about, okay, Batman's going to sort of like mentally be more stable when he ultimately like comes to his like realization and wins this inner fight with himself. But how they do that and like what steps we get to get there is something else. So, well, you know, we'll see how it pans out. I mean, I kind of trust Ram V at this point, to be honest. But
well, and also I like the idea that he has to be reborn, and who's helping him? That is Talia al Ghul, and it might not be Lazarus, right? But he's got to come out of the side of this desert.
But it's you know, it's just not a literal Lazarus, but it's a Lazarus and thematically,
right. And I like that. I like that. That's that tie to rebirth and, you know,
I mean, it's the same
resetting.
It's, you know, it's kind of like Dark Knight Rises. There's not literally a pit in that movie, but there's a big well that he goes into that effectively acts like a Lazarus pit where he comes reborn out of it. So
I also want to point out what the Orgums are doing too. It very reeks of fascism, right? Because there's this sheen that everything on the top is fine, right? People are walking down the dark streets of Gotham hand in hand and wearing, you know, fancy clothes without fear. However, the Orgums are sending like their shock troops in to remove anybody that would, you know, speak out, right? Anybody that kind of poses a threat, you know. And so I also like that Ram V's holding that in, and that like just because things seem perfect doesn't mean like above the surface, it's not still rotting. And Gotham is still, it's just a different kind of rotting this
I mean,
time.
it's just a lie anyway. All of it's a
Mm-hmm.
lie. It's all just this
Mm-hmm.
reality engine stuff and influence,
Mm-hmm.
which just kind of is like a fictional amplification of what propaganda is. It's just like,
Yeah.
hey, everything's going great, everything's fine, we're the
Mm-hmm.
best city in the world, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But actually made literal via science fiction stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like all that too. And again, it's all the nuances here because it's still, at the end of the day, it's still a superhero story. Batman fighting this representation of the Asmer in the desert, and that looks rad. But there's deeper things going on here, and that's why I appreciate Ramvi as a writer.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Though I understand why some people might not be enjoying this part of the run as much, the arc, just because it doesn't have as maybe much of it as a clear story that it's going through each issue. It's a bit
Mm-hmm.
more, dreamlike. It's a bit more,
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? Hypnotic, I guess.
Yeah, there is this dreamy sense to it in kind of a Lynchian type way, right? Like stuff seems not quite right, and that's the point. It's drawing your attention to it. But yeah, and to me, it's really resonating with me. I started reading this one of the nights, and I got sleepy, so I put it down. And not that it did make an imprint, but I had to go back and read because there's just so much. So Ramvi's also packing a lot into those Federici pages, because the stuff that did stick with me was a lot more of the more straightforward Montoya stuff. But all of these bigger ideas, I had to go back and revisit before, when I picked it back up.
That's why I was saying it's smart to have that subplot kind of be there as well. Is giving kind of an anchor to everyone who maybe is a bit more frustrated with the dreamlike stuff.
Yeah.
To have this constant, like, more normal side to sort of latch onto. And that stuff's also very good with characters who most people love a lot. So kind of smart in that sense. Did you read the backup?
I did. It's the more of the Dr. Hurt stuff. And so they're going in. They notice, like, Gotham always had this castle, right? Because they're going into this big opulent manor. This is the weird thing too, is they said, was there always a castle just outside of Gotham City? They said no. Then how's it here now? So it's kind of making the idea of Dr. Hurt as this mythic figure, right? That just kind of makes things happen. And so they're gonna sneak into his big, like, masquerade party, and that's where they're gonna kill him. But as they get there, there's all these people wearing more like the Hurt style masks. It's just like the eyes. But what these victims of Hurt are wearing are like almost full masks. And so they kind of stick out. And as they're going, one of the one lady that was married to Dr. Hurt meets another lady. And it's like, oh yeah, no, we're all his brides. Like, he was trying to make an heir, and all of us failed. Like, he still is looking for that heir. And that puts her in like this spiral that she ends up leaving the group and going and grabbing a bottle of wine. So they end up, and there's this guy on stage, and he has all of these people in like these like tubes, and they're all standing there in their underwear, and he's talking about how they are perfect human specimens, and Dr. Hurt has done this to show you what perfection can be. And as he's talking about them, they're like a senior vaccinologist and a pediatric neurosurgeon, and so they're not just physically perfect, but socially and mentally. And then he hits them with this gas, and I'm assuming this is meant to be Dr. Hurt on stage, except now he's wearing a mask that's more like the characters that are coming to kill him, which I thought was odd. And these people start in the tube start freaking out that they can't get out. So our heroes, for lack of a better term, are like, we have to do something. And the guy that was left in the wheelchair pulls out a gun and goes, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what to do," and he tells them to run. So they run. The one bride is still drinking this wine. They come into this parlor area where everybody it looks like they're dead. And the one wife she was talking to is like, oh yeah, no, there's still a little bit of wine left if you want to die with us. So he had poisoned the wine on this, and they go, oh no, because she's already drunk too much of it. So as we're whittling down our heroes. They leave her. They go up the steps, the remaining two, and they go to the top of this staircase where there's just a lone throne sitting there, and our main guy, the bald guy, is like, oh man, what a narcissist. And he goes, but where is he? And the one last lady that's with him pulls a gun and says, he's right here. He always has been. You understand perfectly well that I'm also Dr. Hurt. So it's almost as if these experiments that he's done on them is just creating more people like him. And it definitely gives the vibe, as I remember in reading in Morrison's Batman R.I.P., the sense of Dr. Hurt as the devil. And this issue, and this backup, it really felt like a Dante's Inferno. Like, the further they get into this thing, the deeper into hell they descend. And when finally they look for who the devil is, it's them staring back at themselves. And this is like their own personal hell. And so the fact that Dan Watters is able to navigate this, despite not, like, I don't remember any of these characters' names. I barely remembered what they were doing. For just this small chapter, it was very compelling. So I got to give them credit. And the art by Christopher Mitten it's pretty good. Like, the layouts are there. It's just everything's a lot behind these masks, and you lose some of the expression going on there because they're all kind of these heavier, almost opera style masks that you'd see. So the colors are all there. Everything's kind of in these like greens and blues. So there's this unifying sense. The deeper they get into this house, the darker things get. So it goes from lighter blues to darker to purples. But yeah, it's pretty good. I just wish again I had remembered more. Like, the one guy that stuck out the most was the guy that had fallen and ended up in the wheelchair with the halo on, because I couldn't tell you what the rest of them were still upset about Dr. Hurt. So that's the one drawback here.
Okay. Well, I mean, oh well. For whatever reason, I think it's because obviously I didn't read the last time, so when I saw it this time as the same, I was like, I'll just leave it.
I thought you did.
Oh, I didn't. No, I did not read this last time.
I remember talking about it with you. I thought.
I mean, you probably talked about it, but
yeah. All right.
All right. What are you giving Detective Comics?
All right. So as a whole, I will give it a solid 8.
Yeah. I think 8 out of 10 sounds right to me as well. I like what it's poking at. I love the subplot. I think, there's an argument for maybe it to be slightly less dreamlike, maybe would help, but it's just hitting at a lot of cool ideas and a lot of fun stuff.